Aloha Kako, and welcome back to Just&True. Tonight I want to briefly go over China and how they are rapidly acquiring dual-purpose military and industrial use land very, very rapidly across the globe. They have an initiative known as the One Belt, One Road Initiative, which is a very worrisome and for me it's a hot issue, and I'm trying to keep up with it as much as I can because the purpose of it is very convoluted, and the substantial threat that it can create for not only the world economy but for any enemy of China is pretty grand. It's pretty large. So what the One Belt, I'm sure you already know, most of you, what the One Belt, One Road initiative is China has a plan to connect Asia, Africa, and Europe with three very, very large, actually the largest roads ever built. Altogether, it'll be the largest civil works project the world has ever known. They want to connect all throughout Africa, Asia, China, and obviously China's in Asia, and Europe through the heartland of China with three massive land roads and two maritime shipping lanes. Now, what worries me about this is, of course, the reason why most people have highways and the reason why the military in the United States, or the United States itself, has highways and freeways was not to support the major population. It was built to convoy and to transport troops very quickly across the nation. Now, that's exactly what I'm proposing China is doing with this. It is not for a civilian use. It will be open for civilian use, obviously, and for economic use and for trade. But it is a very powerful tool for them to have rapid deployment all throughout the world, which is a huge thing. It is another event and action that they're doing to support that they are trying to basically take over the world is the South China Sea. What they're doing, they're building these man-made islands in the South China Sea. They're claiming these almost wars against Singapore and Vietnam and Taiwan. So they are very aggressive right now. So it does. My worry is not unwarranted. It's not a peaceful nation building a road. It's a very aggressive nation building a road. What they're doing right now is they're loaning out money, absurd amounts of money, these huge loans to countries that they know are not going to be able to repay it. They allow these countries to default on the loan, and in order to wipe the slate clean and let these people default, they take property. They have recently taken 3 or 4 ports in Africa. They've taken multiple ports throughout Asia, Southeast Asia, onward up. They've taken one in Europe, and they're gaining more. Now, these vessels will have access to these China-owned, this land is Chinese now. It's now China land. Their water rights, the waterways and such, they're going to have access to these ports. Of course, the maritime merchant vessels is what they're under the guise of, but these ports are very, very large ports, and they can and will be used for military purposes. I bring this up because just recently, yesterday or the day before, in the Spratly Islands, which is in the South China Sea, one of these 3 or 4 island chains that are contested down there, China has created this maritime search and rescue island. While I was researching this maritime search and rescue island, I learned that all Chinese merchant ships can and do act as militia ships when called upon. So they created this maritime merchant island in the Spratly Islands, and it's for search and rescue, but it has military armament on it, and it is going to be allowed to use military and militia ships. All civilian ships are considered militia ships in China, all maritime merchant vessels. This is very worrying because with the accumulation of them, this road is, I want everybody to go and research this road. This road is massive. To connect all of Asia, Africa, and Europe by these roads as a massive underdoing, but they're doing it right now. Now, they have a very tumultuous relationship with India. It's off again, on again. But for this one road project, what they're doing is, again, they had these huge loans, and they had these huge, massive military agreements to allow to go up through Pakistan, go up through India, and to create these roads and to have access to these military bases, to build infrastructure in these areas. And China is growing at such a large level. This road is a huge concern. Now, I do understand it's far, far from our neck of the woods in our neighborhood, but it will expand the global reach of this horrible, horrible Xi Jinping dynasty regime that is just very threatening to the rest of the world. Now, what's happening in the South China Sea? Taiwan is showing its force. You see China building more man-made islands. They're getting further out. You have the U.S. and the U.K. still doing freedom of navigation operations down the South China Sea. We are now entering the South China Sea with battleships, but no air carriers have gotten there yet. And it is very worrying. Please look into the One Belt, One Road initiative by China. It is a military civil operation, I should say, infrastructure operation that we should all know about, we should be aware of, and we should be discussing, because I think it's a huge threat to the Western society if and when there's ever a military conflict. The other thing I wanted to discuss real quick is the appearance of Russian mercenaries in Venezuela. Now, to me, it's very apparent to most people that Russia, pre any conflict that they have with any nation, before they show their hand and show that they're present in the nation, they send these untagged, unidentifiable, no-wearing insignia mercenaries, which are in every aspect a Russian soldier. It's in the Russian regime. They go to these areas. They do forward intelligence gathering. They do forward operating base establishments, and they just get situational awareness for the pre-assault or for pre-military events and actions. We saw it in the Ukraine, we saw it in Kiev, we saw it in Syria, and now we're seeing it down in Venezuela. We're getting reports and we're getting photos of the massive amount of Russian militants down there. They're Russian mercenaries, they're Russian militants, they have no insignia, but they are Russian soldiers. This is huge. It's very telling, because what it says is that Russia is already involved. Obviously, we know that. Russia doesn't want to lose its influence in Venezuela. It's backing Maduro. But their military standpoint in Latin America is much larger, I think, than most people understand. And Russia putting down these unidentified and unidentifiable soldiers is huge. And again, it's very telling, because it shows you their interest. It shows you what they're willing to do. It shows you what Russia is capable of and what they will be doing. If we look at the past, what happened in Ukraine and what happened in Syria, they sent these mercenaries, and shortly after there was a larger military movement. That could possibly be what's happening now. We're seeing these Russian militants down there with no insignia. They're helping stabilize or destabilize the opposition, stabilize Maduro. They're helping set up these boundaries with Colombia, with these large arsenals, large machines, large armored personnel carriers, and artillery that's moving down to the Colombian border. So we do know that there is a Russian presence there. Those bombers that supposedly left Venezuela, the supersonic, nuclear-capable, high-altitude aircraft, did indeed leave Venezuela. We saw them land, we saw them leave. You can look at those photos, but they did not leave South America. What they did is they were just relocated to Bolivia. Bolivia has huge ties with Russia. They have a huge military pact. They have a huge economic pact. They have billions and billions of dollars invested. Russia has billions of dollars invested into Bolivia for its natural gas and for its other resources there. It has military infrastructure. Russia has military infrastructure set up in Bolivia. It has industrial infrastructure. It can produce armaments in Bolivia. So I do believe that with the threats we're coming and we're hearing from Putin exclaiming and disclaiming that America is starting a coup, telling the world that, and threatening and warning the United States to stop harassing Venezuela, and we're continuing these actions, I think it's a very precarious situation. So the update basically is that we do have confirmed Russian insurgents in Venezuela operating with Maduro and helping establish, which is an MO, which is a pattern of assault for Russia that we've seen previously in the last decades really. And it is very telling. You got to remember, Putin is ex-special forces himself. He's an intelligence gatherer. He's a field agent. And this is something that he does. It's a intelligence move. He's showing up without insignia, and he's doing intelligence gathering, and he's doing important works and counterintelligence works before he shows up with his military and shows his hand. So I think that's very, very important to know. Again, look into the One Belt, One Road, and understand that there is already a Russian presence in Venezuela as well as in Bolivia, a stone's throw away from both Venezuela and Miami. Anyway, aloha, mahalo. Until next time, hui ho.